And we are going. So, this is the Within Tolerance podcast. I'm Payton Dean, and I'm joined by Dylan Jackson here. And basically, this is going to be episode one of hopefully many episodes to come. The goal with this podcast is to do this weekly, and we haven't picked a day yet that these are going to be released, but this is the first episode, and we're probably just going to be talking about each other, where we came from, how we got into machining, what's our backgrounds, all that fun stuff. So, Dylan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, well, welcome to the podcast. This is exciting. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm really excited about this. Dylan and we played around with this software beforehand, and I think we've got everything kind of dialed down, but there might be some kinks in post editing, but we should be able to get it a good flow and process down, so I'm not too worried.
Yeah, I think we should get it within tolerance eventually.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I guess if you want, should we just, I guess we could start with you. Do you want to just give like a background? Because I don't even know you that well as far as like how you got into everything. So it'd be interesting for me as well, along with the audience, kind of like where you got started, then I can do the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. So my journey into machining started. I started going to college for mechanical engineering here in Tucson at the University of Arizona, and about 2 years in, was just getting very burnt out, and I would rather party with friends than go to class. And so my GPA dropped, and I had to go to our local community college to raise my GPA and keep doing what I was doing. And while I was at my community college, I took my first machining course there. They have a really good machining program, and I took one just as a elective to fill credits, and thought, oh, this should be fun. And I absolutely fell in love. I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is all of the practical, hands-on stuff that I wanted to get into engineering for in the first place. I loved designing things as a kid. I loved making things, all of that. So it was a really good fit. And at first, I was just going to do. They have a certification program, so I was going to do a manual machining certificate. And after I finished that, I was like, well, I'll dabble in CNC, and I took the CNC courses. And about halfway through those, I said, I'm just going to stick it out and get my associates in machine tool technology. And while I was there, I applied at a shop. They had an ad out for a Mastercam programmer, and I had just started Mastercam. Like, I think just had my first class. And so I went in and said, I can't really program yet, but I will be able to, and I'd love to learn. And thankfully at the time, my position allowed me, they took me on as an unpaid intern for a few months just to kind of feel me out. And I started out with that, and then one of our maintenance guys quit, and so they said, "Oh, there's a paycheck available if you want to go, more than just," because I was only going in a day or two a week or something like that. And so I started going in more and more, and eventually worked my way up from pretty much sweeping the floors to one of their top programmers within the course of a couple of years. And
And is this
then
the company you're still with now?
no. So
Okay.
I was made a contract programmer there. Just some differences with some of the people there. And anyway, it all worked out so that I left there, kind of bounced around between another shop that was a lesson in what not to do, I guess, is
Okay.
the next shop I worked in. Lots of things that really irked me about it, not doing what you say and things like that. And then I landed where I currently am. I actually went there through a recruiter who misinformed me on what they were looking for. He said, "Oh, they're looking for a programmer, and they're using Fusion," because he knew I was using Fusion. And I get there and I ask them about that, and they go, "Oh no, we're looking for either a button pusher or somebody in quality." And
Oh boy.
so I started out in quality there, and about a little over a year ago, they lost one of their engineers and found out that I had all this experience in programming and running jobs and things like that. And so they kind of pulled me into the engineering side. And so now I do both the quality engineer and manufacturing engineer job there, both creating processes for large production runs, programming our CMM, and just kind of general IT stuff. I mean, I kind of wear a lot of hats there. And then
Okay.
about in 2015, so 4 years ago now, on the side, my business partner Brad and I started Proteum Machining because we both worked at shops that we felt like we could do better. Like, we wanted to buy the right tooling and invest in doing things the right way, and turning out jewelry as parts rather than just like, oh well, if it says a 125 finish and the profilometer says 120, it's good, ship it.
Yeah.
And so I've just kind of built that up nights and weekends through the last 4 years, and that's kind of where we stand now.
And you guys have shop space and multiple machines.
Yeah, we have a 1,000 square foot shop with two machines right now: a Kitamura vertical mill and a Brother vertical mill, and then we've got a manual lathe and a bead blaster and some small support equipment.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
about you? I know
So,
a little bit of your background, but I haven't heard the whole story, so I'm interested to hear.
yeah. So I'll try to sum it up, but basically, I was. It kind of goes into two things. So for those that don't know, I'm Hex Gadgets on Instagram, and I actually have two kind of companies, but they're kind of merged into one. And there's more to come on that in the coming couple weeks here. But basically, the Hex Gadgets is more of the machining side of things, the manufacturing, and then I also run a company called X39 Brick Customs, which is really how I got into all this, which is more of a custom Lego injection molded parts business. And that's kind of where the story starts. And that I think it was, I want to say 2013 or 2012. I want to say 2012. So I was 12 years old at that time. And I had saw all these other, I was always into Lego as a kid. And then I was always into history as a kid. So I loved building like World War II dioramas and stuff like that that I could really like actually learn and do research on. I loved watching documentaries, stuff like that. And so there were some of these companies out there that was making like Lego military related stuff. And the main issue is Lego doesn't do military stuff because of politics and whatnot. They want to stay, you know, out of that sector more or less. So the problem was some of these companies didn't make some of the accessories for the little Lego minifigures that I wanted. They might make a M1 Grand, but I want an M1 Carbine or something like that. And so that led me and my grandpa to start kind of getting into the injection molding. And I remember watching a bunch of John Saunders videos on his tag back in the day, the little desktop CNC. So when I was 13 years old, I bought one with a bunch of money I saved up at the time. Felt like a bunch. And then I bought that. It took us probably a year to learn really what everything was. We didn't know what parallels were. We didn't know what an end mill versus a ball mill was. I remember because our main goal was to make these tiny injection molds for little Lego guns and accessories. And I remember at one point we didn't know what a flat end mill versus a ball mill was, and it was a big kind of difference. It's like, oh, we can actually get nice mold cavities now with a ball mill. And so that just gives you an idea of like completely self-taught, and that just spiraled into things. And now it's kind of like, okay, last year I bought a brand new Haas DM2 to do more mold work. And back up a little bit more, I had actually dropped out of high school more or less junior year, went to college. There was a workaround in my local state where I could take a machining program, a 2-year course, and still get my high school diploma. And I got that. And when I was 18, I got my machine technology degree and my high school diploma at the same time. And now I'm doing more job shop work with my Haas because of my actual formal education on machining, which was really nice because you could be completely self-taught, and I know there's people out there that are, but it's really nice to have that experience from instructors that have been doing it for 30 plus years. So now it's just kind of turned into doing job shop work along with still using my machines and whatnot to make custom Lego stuff, because I still think it's pretty cool to do gun related stuff, and the injection molding, I really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, that's something that I don't have any experience with, but I'd love to eventually play around with some more. It seems like you have a lot of fun and get to make some really cool parts.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a whole different set of problems, um, but it really allows you to just use that other side of your brain to be like, okay, how do I solve this issue? And you still get to use your machining capabilities and knowledge to make good molds and whatnot. It's all a process, but I'm slowly but surely getting things dialed in. So it's kind of now it's just kind of like, okay, what do I want to make? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, now I got parts. So once you get to that step, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, you've got a pretty expansive catalog too. While you're talking, I jumped on your website.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there's over 200 products, but there's a couple different variants of products. So there's probably 350 different products.
Wow, that's
So
impressive.
yeah, that's another thing that once this podcast gets going, I think we can also talk more business related stuff because I'm trying to get more organized with all that, and then it's we talked earlier about some of these other companies that have a couple products and that's all they sell, which is great. But it's like for me, I got to have all these different SKUs, and it's like, how do you manage all of that? It's not like I can just have one little table with all my products on it. There's so many. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I even if our audience doesn't want to hear it, I definitely want to hear it because that's a side of the business that I have no experience in.
yeah,
Like I, all of Proteum's work for the most part has been prototype work. Small run
okay,
production, prototype. We do a little bit of design work and engineering work for some of our customers, but we don't have any of our own products yet. We haven't sold anything of our own yet, and so hearing how you manage that, how you built your website, all of that, I've got a lot of questions.
yeah, that'll be some good episodes for sure. Because especially now, like I hinted at, I'm kind of merging the two, and so that has its own set of issues with websites and LLCs and domains and all that fun stuff. But it's a process, but it's totally doable, especially with all the technology we got, with Shopify and just everything's so connected nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny or coincidental. I've actually done work for possibly one of your competitors at some point.
Really?
They used to be called BrickTactical, I think,
Okay.
and then I don't know what they're called now. And the guy who runs it, Jordan, I like we've been on and off talking. The last time we talked, he was like, "Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of work for you," and then fell off the map.
Uh
But
huh.
like I've done more design work for him than anything. I think it's now called Mini Z Figs, but they specialized in the beginning, at least, with like these minifigure display cases.
Okay. I might. There's a couple of them out there. You'd have to send me some pictures if you could find them, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm trying to find his website now, but maybe they don't exist anymore. I'm having kind of a hard time finding them.
Was that a while ago? You said.
Yeah, the last time we talked must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago.
No, it's
Yeah,
funny.
that was actually over a year ago. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, but that's another thing I wanted to talk about every now and then. So you said you do, because you've got a formal mechanical engineering background. You said correct?
I've got 2 years into it. I don't have a degree, and I'd love to go back and
Okay.
finish it at some point. But that's kind of how I got into this, at least.
So I guess a question for me or me to you would be, so like let's say you mentioned you do a lot of design work for customers too.
Yeah, yeah, we do. I mean, we're starting to do more and more. It's a side of the business that I'd really like to grow because I enjoy it, and I at least think I'm decent at it. So
Yeah. So would that be like something, maybe someone, I mean it could be anything, right? Someone has an idea and they want you to do the whole design, or maybe they started a design and they want to know how to make it cheaper for you to machine it later, or
yeah, for a lot of our customers, that's what it ends up being. They're already in a, they have a product or something like that, and they send it to us and say, "Hey, if there's anything on this part that we can do to make it cheaper for you guys to make for us, let us know. Here's the files. Go at it." And
okay.
we go back and forth and advise them on manufacturability. Um, find out if they actually need certain tolerances the way they are, and kind of educate them on best practices just to make both our job easier and their parts cheaper for them.
I think that's always awesome when you can connect to your customers like that and be like, hey, like we talked about this briefly, but like where you can actually, they're not as so hard headed as far as like, hey, if you change this radius, like it's gonna make my life way easier, and they're able to do that, and not just be so stubborn and be like, no, this is the way it is, this is how we want it, type thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some companies out there too that are the exact opposite. I know of one aerospace company I've worked at, dealt with at past shops I've worked at, that if you even approach them about changing anything, they just say, "Oh no, it's okay, thank you. We'll take the work somewhere else."
Really?
Like they don't even want you to broach the subject of changing anything because there's so many levels deep in as far as bureaucracy that it's not worth their time, and they'd rather deal with a shop that plays ball. And on one hand, when you have that much bureaucracy, I kind of understand it, but it
Yeah.
makes them just absolutely horrible to deal with.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, for some people like us that are relatively small in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I'd rather stray away from them anyways. Um,
Oh,
the
same. Yeah.
larger, the large companies.
Yeah. For now, I mean, the thing is like my day job currently, we are, I deal with so much paperwork in association with that. And I see how much it takes to really deal with some of those companies that I personally don't want to deal with that at my shop. Like we strive to put some processes in place like that, but at my shop at Proteum, but it's just for a two-man shop, it's just not worth the money. Like unless I have guaranteed work or something like that, it's not. Yeah, it's just not worth our money and time. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I love finding the local companies. I only really work with local companies. I don't know about you, but I know you worked with a couple companies where they're far enough away that you're actually shipping parts and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I don't know, 50-50. We're local and out of state.
Oh, okay, that's a good balance then, I think.
My goal in the next year or so is to really expand more locally because there's quite a bit of work out there locally that I so far we have done almost zero advertising. It's all been word of mouth or people I knew from college or just small reach outs and nothing big, no advertising campaigns, no I don't know, pretty much nothing. No going around to shops or anything like that. So
What about through Instagram? Have you ever gotten work through there? I've gotten a little bit, but not as much as you would think.
I've gotten a little bit, and really it wasn't great. One of them we kind of dealt with somebody that ended up screwing us over in the end.
Yeah,
So I don't know. It was a cool job, and like I learned a lot on it. But as far as looking for trying to use Instagram to get work, that's not why I do it. Like I do it because I enjoy the instant machinist community, and I enjoy the people I talk to, and when finally get to meet them in person at IMTS or AU or places like that, it's cool to at least have a little bit of rapport with them.
100% agree. Yeah, I found that there's plenty of work locally. You just got to be able to find it and tap into it. And like you said, I mean, when I went to college for the 2-year machining technology degree, I mean, the way this worked out, I didn't have to pay for college because I went through this program and basically the state paid for it, which was kind of cool. But if let's say I had to pay for it, it'd probably be like $15,000 for those 2 years. I mean, just the amount of contacts and people I met, of larger shops. We would go on shop tours every quarter. Just the amount of contacts that I met was well worth that amount.
Yeah, I completely agree. The people that I met in school were invaluable. Like one of my teachers, he started out, or he worked almost the entire time I was in school. I think he only very recently went full time, but he was working at one of the more prominent prototype aerospace shops in town. And him and I became friends because I was one of the few that really gave it my all, like all the time. I was really into it.
Yep.
I got it and was just looking to learn more. And so he, showed me their shop at one point, and we would talk about just random parts and ways to approach parts. And he had seen so much that it really gave me a leg up on a lot of other people because I knew how to start thinking about parts.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we can talk more about because I know we've talked via text and whatnot. You've helped me a lot with parts, but for some of the guys that might be listening to this or eventually listening to this, hence this being our first episode, but that's what I'm excited about with this is that we're catering towards the smaller shops, mainly job shops and whatnot. Maybe some more of the smaller guys that have a product that they're trying to bring out and try to start making with their own machines. But, you know, there's more to it than that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a huge difference if you have a product versus job shop because a product, it's like once you solve how to hold it, how to, fixture it, all that stuff, it's pretty straightforward. But as you and I both know, job shop work, you get a email from a customer with the part and it's just like, okay, it's game time. How do I hold this thing? And everything else.
Right, exactly. I mean, I might see, I don't know, five, six, seven new part numbers a week sometimes. I mean, it's not always like that, but it sometimes is. And like, yeah, like you said, it's always that game of how fast can I solve this and how reliable is the process going to be? Is it going to get me through what I need to do? You know, is it going to, if it's only two parts, like, yeah, the setup might not be something I want to post on Instagram unless it works great. But if it works, it works. Like if it gets parts out the door and makes me feel confident enough that I push the green button, like that's what matters sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be hard to get to that point.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's one of the nice challenges and that's the thing I like about machining in general is you get a part and there's just so much. It's all about like that sitting down, you get that email and you're like, okay, time to quote this thing and think everything through. And the key word is everything.
Oh yeah, I feel like we've both had enough of losing our asses on jobs trying to like you forget like, oh, I've got to deburr 100 holes on the backside because I didn't program that, or like I can't get to this edge, so I'm gonna have to deburr that edge on every single thing, or I have to inspect this dimension on every single part because either the customer wants it or I want to make sure that I'm shipping 100% conforming parts.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's those little things I've found I've been able to kind of narrow it down. It's always like work holding, deburr, and really that's about it. Like if you can get those down, your handling time will go down, especially the deburring.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that um, I have definitely learned a lot. That first shop that I worked at, I had an inspector that I didn't really get along with at all. Like him and I were at odds very often. But one thing that he absolutely impressed upon me, and like to this day, like we actually worked again together at the shop I work at now. He came back and worked there, and I thanked him because I hated him at the time, but he made me so much of a better machinist by constantly pushing my buttons when it came to deburring.
Yeah.
Like every single time he would come and yell at me about, well, why didn't you deburr this edge, or why didn't you deburr this, or why didn't you do this differently so that there wasn't a burr? And at the time, I just thought he was, giving me shit because I was young. But
Exactly.
really, it made me a much better machinist.
No, I had a very similar. I remember in school we had to make a little brass hammer. It was an aluminum handle with a little brass hammer head, and we had to manually type out the G code to turn it down on these lathes. And I remember there was like a 50 thou chamfer on the hammerhead, and I remember I had made it, and then I took it over to the manual lathe to Scotch Brite it just to kind of make it look nice, and it rounded over those chamfered edges. And I remember my instructor, I've never seen him get so uptight about this, but he's like, that's not a chamfer anymore, and I'm like, but it looks good, and he's like, well, that's not what the print says. And I was just like, okay, but it's a hammer. And he's like, but that's not what the print says. And it was this big step where it's like, okay, just you can't think of it as what it is. It's like the print rules all. That is the deciding factor. And that was really a turning point. And he brought up and he's like, I've seen aerospace parts scrapped because a chamfer or a radius is off by half a thou. And, a year later, I got a job at a Swiss machine shop, and I saw that firsthand, and I totally did a reverse, and I was like, okay, I believe you now.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like you said, the print is king. Like whatever it says goes, and sometimes it doesn't make sense what they want, but that's what they want. Like either they don't know better and they still put it on the print, or they put it on the print for a very specific reason.
Exactly, yeah. And you don't know what that is, but that's not your job.
Yeah, yeah. If you're not, if you don't work at a company or you don't do all your engineering in house, you can't make those decisions. Like we would
Exactly.
all love to say, oh, I'm pretty sure I know what the intended use of this is, and it won't affect it. But that's not your job. Like
Yeah.
your job is to make it to the print.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big turning point. But once you get over some of these hurdles, it's kind of like, okay, there's only a couple things you got to look out for. But I really enjoy that process of, okay, it's a new challenge every time. And normally for me, at least, because I'm not, I mean, I've only been doing job shop work for 8 months, maybe 6 months. And I've gone through a lot of part numbers, but it's nice to be able to look back and be like, okay, like if you get a repeat job, like those one parts I was showing you, those larger parts, going from when I ran them in January to when I just finished running them here in June. And it's like, man, I mean, these are just better parts, just the way I made them. Like everything's deburred off the machine. There's no handwork. It's just like, this is just a better process. And just to be able to see that I'm learning that I think it's cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had that chamfer issue on the rounded corner. That
Yeah.
that I think came out beautifully once you got it all sorted.
Yeah, yeah, and that was another thing with the customer. I was able to just call them and be like, "Hey, I think this would," and I knew the intent. This is kind of you know, going against what we just said, but I was like, "I know the intended use here. It's just supposed to look good. Is this okay?" And they were like, "Yeah, just go for it." So I was like, "Okay, cool."
Well, and that's the thing though, is like, yeah, you knew the intended thing, but you didn't just go for it and hope that they accepted it. You called them and you verified, and that's okay. I mean, if your customer is open to that and you know that they're open to that, there's no reason not to call them. But like, if you had just said like, well, it should be that way, so it's going to be that way, like
Yeah,
that's
that
when
could
you
have been
get in
bad.
trouble. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Then all of a sudden you have 110 parts that are, yeah, they don't want.
right. Or they rework them internally, or just accept them, but next time they don't look towards you for work, or
Exactly.
they'd rather bid it out somewhere else, somewhere that'll follow the directions.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
yeah, I've definitely dealt with customers in the past that they, on repeat jobs, they'll rework something internally until finally they get fed up and they reject it, or they, you know, just go out to bid somewhere else.
really,
Oh yeah,
wow.
yeah. You never know what they're doing internally. Like even if they're upset with your parts, but they need them, they're in a bind or something like that. Like they might accept them until it becomes a real pain point.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's just all those little things got to look out for. But yeah, I mean, if you want it, we can call it here. We're almost at 30 minutes. I think that'd be a good intro for all the guys listening.
Yeah, sure.
So that is going to be episode 1. Like I said, we're still trying to figure everything out. By the time you're listening to this, there's probably going to be a couple episodes already up, and the goal is to get them out on. I think it'll be pretty easy to get them on SoundCloud. Spotify will be a little bit tricky. The podcast app on all iPhones and whatnot, that shouldn't be a problem. I haven't looked into that too much, but I definitely want to get it on there as well. And then a little website has been made, still working on that. So total beginning stages, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this and hopefully you stick around for the future episodes.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, and yeah, we hope you guys keep coming back.
Yeah. All right, guys. See you next time.